Lucky Jane, I'm sure, needs no introduction to you all. He is the George W. Brumley Jr. Professor and Chairman of Pediatric here at Emory. He is also the Chief Academic Officer at Children's Hospital Atlanta and serves as the Executive Director of the Emory Children's Pediatric Research Institute. After obtaining his medical degree and doing his pediatric residency in India, he did a research fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania, followed by a neonatology fellowship at University of Illinois at Chicago. He also has an MBA from Goizueta. As it relates to research, Dr. James' own research is focused on the physiology of sodium and fluid transport in the lung and on strategies to improve lung clearance. He is extraordinarily dedicated to all three missions, that being clinical, teaching, and research. So feeding into these three missions, he has worked hard to build an exceptional training and career development environment both at Emory and children. And so as evidence of this, you'll hear more about the Warshaw Fellow Research Awards. He launched those in 2017, and to date, he's funded 32 Fellows Research projects. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I'll tell you a lot more about that in the coming days. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lucky Jane, working and collaborating in the pediatric research environment at Emory and Children.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Tom. Wonderful. What a great way to introduce all of you to research, to clinical excellence. One thing I've discovered in my long journey in medicine is that to be a good clinician, you've got to be a triple threat. There's no alternative to that. And that means that excellence needs to move seamlessly from clinical care delivery to science and innovation to training the next generation of people. There aren't many other professions where this is as profound a need as in medicine. And the more you travel along this journey, you'll see what I'm telling you is so true. I graduated from medical school in 1979, and the dean of our school in our graduation message said, remember, you're all going to be triple threats. And so I invite you all to embrace the first program with no hesitation at all. Even if you end up doing a small project during your fellowship that allows you to explore research methods, it's an important way of discovering. I'll tell you maybe about the first project that I did as a fellow. But before that, I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge Tom Fox and Dr. Stacy Heilman. Both of them put a lot of effort into this to make it meaningful. And of course, Mary Jane, who every year continues to keep all of the fellowship programs together. This is a unique thing in our department. Not many departments across the country do this, where all of the fellows come together. I invite you all to think about other ways to do this. I'd love to invite all of the fellows for social gatherings, occasionally educational opportunities, etc. So I'll tell you about a small project that I did, or maybe I'll tell you about two small projects. It was my first year in the United States. I was a research fellow at CHOP. And this was the summer of 1985. There was a report in the lay literature or lay press all over the country that a newborn baby had died in a NICU from aspiration of a pacifier. Okay, so what was common during that time is we didn't have any preemie nipples or preemie pacifiers. So for these tiny growing premature babies, what people would do is they would take a nipple with the plastic sheath off the bottle and would plug the back end of it with one of those temperatures, the hard thing that we use to put a lead on the chest. And that would become the pacifier. Well, must have been this vigorous premature baby who sucked on it hard enough to peel the plastic off of that uh, adhesive in the back. And as the plastic got peeled off, the entire plastic nipple went straight into the back of the throat. And before anyone could notice, the baby had complete arrest, and the baby died. And so it was a major thing across the country at that time. How can something like that happen? I was in the lab working on lung mechanics, and I said, wow, this is interesting. This was the report we saw in the morning newspaper. And so by noontime, I brought half a dozen of those nipples and those shields from the NICU. I put in a little pressure transducer into the back of that nipple, and I simulated pressure tracings from just routine bottle feeding in the model that we had generated for respiratory mechanics to see how much pressure it would take to peel the plastic off. And then we took the same transducer into the NICU the following day and just measured what the babies were doing. It was shocking that a good 20% of the babies got close to the pressure, the negative pressure that was needed to peel off the plastic and aspirate that. Nobody in the country had noticed the fact that this is something real. And so 2 days of work, I got my first publication in a month. In 1 month, the editor of Pediatrics called me and said that they are going to fast track that publication, and wrote a little editorial piece attached to it. It was published as a brief letter to the editor, but enough to create a lot of press coverage. I was invited to the American Academy of Pediatrics to talk about it. And I said, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And then a fellow was working in my lab, and we were at that time working with nitric oxide. Nitric oxide as a pulmonary vasodilator. And we were using a donor of nitric oxide called GSNO. So it's a glutathione linked thing. And what we found was that when we were doing our experiments, half the experiments showed a very robust effect of nitric oxide in the cells that we were working with. And in the other half, there was zero effect. Like I'm talking absolutely zero. So when you have a sort of a curve, where there is a dose-related thing, you can say, okay, yeah, there is something going on with this, but it was so striking. So this fellow from critical care who was working in my lab was looking for a project to do. I said, you know what, John, this is such a weird thing that we are observing. And I think that all of the experiments where the nitric oxide donor is not showing an effect are being done under a hood. And the hood is very warm because of the lights and the disinfection or the environment we had in there. I said, maybe the release of nitric oxide from GSNO is temperature related. And so he had a month in my lab. All we did was we took GSNO and we raised the temperature to see how much nitric oxide was released. And sure enough, there was a beautiful linear curve that when you get to a certain temperature, the almost entire amount of nitric oxide was offloaded of the donor. And so the fellow then came back to the lab to do a little more work because he said, well, Dr. Jain, maybe that is the mechanism the body is using to release nitric oxide, because when we have fever, let's say, we get flushed and we get vasodilated, and maybe that's the mechanism, because this is a natural donor, biological donor that we were using in the laboratory. And so that work, 2 months work, got him the first prize at the Critical Care Society trainee presentations later that year. So that's how I feel research weaves in seamlessly with what we do. My own research, Stacy pointed out that I've spent 30 years in the area of neonatal lung biology. It all started with this observation that when we were working with surfactant, we would give babies surfactant, and there would still be significant residual disease. That it wasn't like you gave surfactant and the lungs became completely normal. In fact, there was a significant lag between when you gave surfactant and when you saw considerable improvement. And the observation at that time that was made by many people across the country and across the globe was that these babies had lung fluid still to clear. And the more premature you are, the more fluid you have to clear, because the baby is completely submerged in the mother's womb, and the lungs are completely full of fluid when these babies are born. And so we started looking at how water is transported across the lung epithelium. And when I came to Atlanta at Emory and Children's, the environment was so amazing to do not just that kind of work, but to do any kind of research. So I enrolled in the lab of one of the nation's top leaders in sodium transport. His name is Doug Eaton. He used to be the vice chair of physiology at that time, later on became the chair. And he told me that, Lucky, I have great interest in sodium transport. I have no interest in the lung. But you're welcome to come and work in the lab, use all the tools we have. Well, 3 years later, I started here in 94. In 96, late 96, a report was published by a few nephrologists working in Sweden that if you knock out the renal sodium transporter, which was known at that time, all newborn babies die. 100% mortality in newborn pups in the laboratory of the knockout model. And when you do the autopsy, they were trying to study what the effect is of salt losing nephropathy, because they were trying to knock out sodium transporter to see what happens to these mice as they deplete themselves of salt completely. And when they autopsied these animals, their lungs were completely full of fluid. That led me to 20 years of work on that one single molecule. That's all I did. We defined the characteristics. We defined where the transporter exists, whether it exists in type 1 cells, type 2 cells, in what relationship it has with CFTR. Because remember, in cystic fibrosis, how many of you are in pulmonology? Yeah. So what's the... I had promised myself that I will not ask questions that might embarrass you. So in cystic fibrosis, the problem that you will deal with is exactly opposite of what we deal with in newborn physiology. We have excessive fluid in the lung. In cystic fibrosis, there is too little fluid in the lung. And so, because there is too little fluid lining the alveolar surface, the secretions get impacted. Cilia can't move. Pseudomonas starts growing in that thing, and that's the cystic fibrosis phenotype. Okay, so it was a great opportunity for me to link up these things and ask, why is it that that the cystic fibrosis lung is not able to secrete, and why is it that the newborn lung is not able to reabsorb, and what is it that happens in a lung infected with SARS-CoV-2 or with influenza virus? So all of that led to 20 years worth of work. At one time, I had two R01s, one PPG. I mean, there was more funding available than one can ever imagine. So it's a great journey. It allowed me to toggle back between the lab and the NICU. I was the fellowship director for 10 years, which allowed me to interface directly with the fellows. I enjoyed teaching. I created a question bank of a few thousand questions, which I still, to this day, lovingly share with our fellows on a monthly basis when they allow me to. But it's wonderful. That is the triple threat that my dean wanted us to be. And I'm glad that some of us have continued to go down that path, even though we're never satisfied with the quality of the work and what else we could do. So with that background, to say that research doesn't mean that you have to be in the laboratory. Research means that you can make quick observations at the bedside and ask yourself, is there an answer to this question that might help other patients that I deal with? And that question in itself becomes our path towards scientific discovery. So keep that open mind as you go through. So let me spend a few minutes telling you about our enterprise that Stacy and Tom have mentioned, why we are so proud of what we have over here. We're only a little over 20 years old. So you compare us to CHOP or Cincinnati or Boston Children's. These organizations have been around for 100 years. Children's Healthcare of Atlanta came to be in 1998. And the partnership between Emory and Children's is also relatively new. But we decided that we wanted to be a nationally preeminent pediatric healthcare system with leading sort of engagement in clinical and academic programs. We knew that we are national leaders in volumes. We do exceedingly well in patient safety and quality, that we had other areas that we could work on, but these were the basic building blocks of a world-class organization. And what I'll show you is a brief glimpse of the journey, in that in 2009, when we were ranked maybe 50th in the country for NIH funding, the CEO at Children's at that time helped develop the research strategy for pediatrics, working with Emory leadership. And then along the way, many key leaders were hired, people like Ami Klin, who created the Marcus Center, Doug Graham and Bill Woods, who led the AFLAC program. We moved into HSRB1. This was a partnership between Emory and Children's, where this entire building, half of it went to pediatrics. The remaining half went to all of the schools at Emory, including School of Medicine, nursing, public health, and everything else. And then in 2016, we got to our goal of being in the top 5. We received our first T32 um, in 2018. This is when I took over from Dr. Barbara Stoll in 2015. She became the dean of UT Houston. She was the chair, and she was a neonatologist, and I worked as her executive vice chair for several years, helping uh, with financial matters. My MBA was in finance. That was what I had wanted to do, was to learn about how decisions are made in healthcare, how economic solutions are sought, but in an increasingly complex way, they make the healthcare environment so difficult. And so when I finished my MBA, Barbara asked if I could start helping with just managing the department's financial affairs and revenue cycle and other things. And then before I knew, she handed me the practice plan and then overall general administration of the department. So it was great learning experience during that time. I was very young. I'd become a full professor at 40 years or 41 years of age. And I'd never been a division chief. But I moved straight from just being a fellowship director to becoming the executive vice chair of a very large pediatric department. It was a very formative time in my career as a foreign-born individual with with a very clear, distinct accent, a color that I still proudly wear on my skin. That I felt very comfortable in that environment. And then in 2007, I was appointed to the Emory Healthcare Board of Directors. I walked into that room the first day, and I said, "Oh my God! I mean, I am definitely in the wrong place over here, because at 5'7", I mean, you see all these, people that you've seen in pictures and in meetings, and you're the only kind of odd person out. But it's all about creating value. It's all about making sure that we do our job right. And I quickly was appointed to the Emory Healthcare Finance Committee, to the Quality Committee of the board, and the 4 years I spent on that board were really remarkable years, which allowed me to then take many of the learnings back into pediatrics. And then learning doesn't stop. In 2009, when our youngest went to college, we had thought that we would never think of going back to school again, because you can imagine at this stage in your career, why would you think of going back to school, getting another degree? And I had already gotten my MBA. So in 2009, both my wife and I joined the public School of Public Health. She was interested in getting an MPH in health outcomes. It was an evening program. All of the coursework was in the evenings, and I said, "Well, what am I going to do sitting at home?" And so, Emory gives you 5 credit hours each semester of credit, tuition credit, and so we took 2 courses each semester. Emory paid for 5. We paid $1,000 per semester out of pocket. 2.5 years, all coursework done. So there's a lot of, and I learned so much during those years, having gone to school twice in a world-class institution like this, that when people say we need to be lifelong learners, I feel like you have to be, it's a blessing to be in an environment like this where you can be lifelong learners. So our missions are completely integrated. Clinical mission managed by Children's, research mission managed by Emory mostly, and teaching mission managed jointly by Children's and Emory. Children's funds all of the graduate medical education programs. So every one of you, the salary you will get is coming from Children's. But the GME program is run out of Emory, and that's the way the arrangement is for everything. When I started in '94, we had 120 faculty members in pediatrics, right over here in the black portion of the slide over here. And then by 2011, we had 256 people. When I took over from Barbara, we had 361 faculty members. We've added almost 200 faculty members in the past 5 years. That's about twice the size of an average pediatrics department in the United States. So in other words, in 5 years, we've added 2 pediatric departments to this department, and that's the rate at which we have grown. This reflects the growth of our training programs. 75 pediatric residents, 25 interns each year. Many of you have gone through our training program here, so you know the structure. We take 3 pediatric neurology residents each year. That's a total of 15. Well sought after program. We have 209 pediatric subspecialty fellows. Some of, but maybe about 140 of these are in the Department of Pediatrics. Rest of them are in orthopedic, plastic surgery, cardiothoracic surgery, and other areas, and they are from all over the campus. There are 53 PhD graduate students and 53 postdoctoral fellows. And you'll in laboratories, world-class laboratories like Dr. Pete Lawler's lab, there are how many PhDs or postdocs do you have in your lab? Yeah, yeah. In fact, the last time we counted, Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, the total number of PhD students, these are people who are doing their PhDs, we have more in pediatrics than all of basic science departments at Emory taken together. I mean, that's because pediatrics is a rich environment. We're happy people. I mean, there are a lot of, I shouldn't use bad words, but you see the AH word that is equivalent of a jerk. Science and general medicine is replete with those types of environments. I feel like we've built a very collaborative environment over here. I won't go through this list, but I just wanted you to see the amazing array of programs where we recruit fellows. We're still relatively small compared to other programs in the country. You look at Cincinnati Children's, 700 beds, 315 trainees. Boston Children's, 415 beds, 381 trainees. CHOP, 555 beds, 366. Children's in Atlanta, 673 beds, 255 trainees. Now, this number over here reflects the allocation we have from the government for our training programs. So CHGME funds a portion of fellowship salaries across the country. Medicare pays for the adult fellowship programs and adult residency training programs. CHGME pays for the freestanding children's hospitals that don't have Medicare patients. Does it make sense? In all adult systems where pediatrics is part of the system, Medicare pays for the training programs. For us, because we are freestanding children's hospital, that doesn't apply, and therefore the Congress in 1997 appropriated $300 million and said, here's for all of the freestanding children's hospital in the country, you will get this much allocation. Since that time, that allocation has not changed. And so in 1997, when we were only Eggleston Children's Hospital, we got $6.7 million out of that pot, whereas CHOP got Boston Children's got 21.6 million, CHOP got 21.8, And so we continue to struggle with the fact that we have been trying to grow our training program, but we don't quite have the funding. But I'll tell you that we have been very lucky. We have a local foundation in Atlanta called the Woodruff Foundation. Um, Woodruff Foundation has done so much around this campus, and they have given us a large grant, almost about $7 million each year, to fund our graduate training programs. And so we've been able to grow, and we've just launched an expansion plan to add nearly 50 more FTEs to our training program. So we're adding a med-peds program in 2 years. We're expanding child neurology, adding more slots to epilepsy, developmental neurology, muscular, and whatever the other terms are. I, one of those, yeah. We're adding fellowship slots to almost every other area. We're looking to the Arthur M. Blank Hospital to see how much more we will need to grow to meet the needs of AMB Hospital, because we will be going from 330 beds at Eggleston to 450 beds at Arthur M. Blank Hospital. So there's going to be a significant jump in the number of beds that we will need to cover. This gives you a snapshot of what before I show you the slide. I trained in Chicago, and within a small circle of maybe 20 miles, there were 6 medical schools. There's University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Rush, Chicago Medical School, Northwestern, and Loyola. Each one of them had their own children's hospitals, either freestanding or hospital within a hospital. And I remember that even though we had one of the leading maternal fetal medicine programs in the country at that time where I trained, our congenital heart program was almost at the point of being shut down because there wasn't enough volume, because every hospital was competing to get those patients. Now look at this. This is discharges within the Atlanta region. This is everyone else in the entire region. This is us. And so for those of you who've chosen to invest 3 years of your life in Atlanta, you made a brilliant choice, because nowhere else will you get this type. Nowhere else in the country, I can promise you, not even in Houston or in Little Rock, Arkansas, can you get this type of a distribution. One of the leading programs in the country. So I chair the clinical program or I'm the chair of the clinical chairs for pediatrics in the United States. So I manage that portfolio now. And people tell me about the problems they have with 80,000 ER visits, 100,000 ED visits. Guess how many ED visits we had in 2019 before COVID hit us? 230,000 ER visits. That's not counting 150,000 urgent care visits. So if you want to do a small project in asthma, where's my pulmonology friend? Or you want to do a small neurology project, or you want to do whatever, a first seizure thing, I mean, between the 3 ERs, we're right now, our total is still over 200,000 ED visits a year, which means on an average, we're seeing roughly about 700 patients each day, just in our ERs. So what about the rest of the state? So think about Ohio. There's Cincinnati Children's, nationwide in Columbus, Rainbow Babies and Cleveland Clinic, and one more program in Mayo. And there is Akron Children's. This is a small state, guys. I mean, we're not talking California or Texas. This is a small state. And so here we are in Georgia. This is all of Georgia. This is us. So we still take care of almost double the number of patients than even the second largest program, and then the rest of them are pretty tiny. We're number one in the country for hemonc, pulmonary, craniofacial, and general surgery. Number two in CT surgery, neurosciences, and orthopedics. Number three in gastro. And then you add in the top 10. So this tells you about the amount of research material you have to work with if you choose to do a clinical research project. These are our rankings by subspecialty. We never embraced US World Report as a target. And so for many years, we had Eggleston separate, Scottish Rite separate, and Hugh Spalding separate. Then we decided that since everyone is measuring success by US News World Report rankings, that we needed to be intentional about it. And so now we have all of our subspecialties are ranked. And we have 4 in the top 10. I suspect that within 2 years, we will have all of our subspecialties within the top 10 or top 20, and will be in the honor roll, which means we're one of the top 10 children's hospitals in the United States from a US News World Report ranking standpoint. So it's really an exciting time for us in pediatrics. There's a lot going on over here. If you look at the CAP building, how many of you have seen patients in the CAP building? Yeah, quite a few. It's a beautiful facility. I mean, it's inviting. You enjoy seeing the sunlight. Pete, you probably remember the trailers, don't you? Yeah, where we had the Ronald McDonald Clinic. I mean, that's where we were when I joined the system over here. We had 3 double wides, as they call them in Georgia, where the clinics were housed. And you compare that to, this is just the beginning of the expansion project. HSRB2, right next door, is coming up nicely. This is where we are in HSRB1. And you see how we're going to be adding about 330,000 square feet of research space, prime research space, to this current building. And we're getting a fair amount of space, dedicated space in this new building. This is the master plan of the Druid Hills campus. These are the 2 support buildings. So if you ever go by, Stacy, we should try to maybe do this one time over at the support building. Not the first program, but one of their engagements. I would love to host an evening social. Let them be in the courtyard, and we can order some soft drinks and beer and wine, and let them see what the future of pediatrics is going to look like. But this hospital is now 11 stories tall already. We're adding 1 story to the building each month. And from I-85, Druid Hills to Briarcliff, we have now 78 acres of land. 78 acres of land. So we can grow in the next 20 years from 450 beds to 2,000 beds, if that is the need. But the architectural design is meant to take us from 450 beds to 1,000 beds in the next generation. So all we have to do is pull 1 more tower on that side and add the additional number of beds. And it's already been programmed that way, so you don't have to worry about how the connectivity will be to the new hospital. A few words about research preeminence, I do feel that more and more we're beginning to understand and realize that clinical excellence has to be linked to research excellence. That is the only pathway to national preeminence. Do you agree? Yes. I mean, there isn't, it's not about rankings, folks. It really isn't. It's about being able to take discoveries at the in the laboratory bench research that is being done. It is the ability to take simple technological advancements in the ECMO circuit or a ventilator to the bedside in a swift manner. The normal healthcare environment, it takes 17 years for a good discovery to actually make it to the bedside. It's insane. If you took that much time at Apple or Microsoft or Google, you'd be dead. But in the healthcare industry, minus COVID-19, where we accelerated the pathway for vaccines and many other things, we've been very, very slow in bringing discoveries to patient care. Some of this, our success has been fueled by the fact that Children's has put away a large amount of money in an endowment for us. So this endowment is now a little over $1 billion with a B, and B is in boatload of money. There's not another place in the country where $1 billion of cash has been put aside to support research, training, and academic programs in perpetuity. And so my budget comes out of this endowment. We get about 5% spin off of the $1 billion, which is $50 million on top of everything else that we get. And that allows us to generate with confidence plans to grow, plans to build our training programs, etc. We also have the advantage of these amazing places. I encourage you to think about what you can do with our biomedical engineering departments, a top ranked department in the country, or what you can do with the CDC, or with working with many other organizations, including the CTSA program right here. You're going to add to our strength. I mean, this is not easy, folks. And nobody had expected us to get this far out. People said that you'll get to top 10 at some point, but then every rank is going to be difficult to scale. But the fact that we are the nation's top ranked pediatrics department is pretty remarkable. And I don't know if I have a slide. I don't have a slide here to show you where we rank amongst the freestanding children's hospitals. The comparison isn't fair because we track only grants that come into the Department of Pediatrics, whereas every other freestanding children's hospitals adds to it radiology, pathology, surgery, ENT, everything. But even if we do just the Department of Pediatrics, we rank number 6, behind CHOP, Cincinnati, Boston, and a couple others. So we're doing pretty well even in that list as well. So let me end by saying that that there are new challenges that we are going to continue to have to face. Healthcare is not static by any means. We get more than our general share of challenges. COVID-19 has shown us that medicine cannot be placid and static. And then there are things like endemic racism and other issues that we need to continue to deal with. And I'm very passionate about increasing diversity in the department, bringing in people who with diverse backgrounds, rich backgrounds, people who can really make sure that healthcare delivery caters to the type of patients we deal with. The Emory Healthcare Board of Directors meeting that I first went to was nowhere reflective of the patient care population that we deal with. There were 11 6-foot tall Caucasian males in that room. It was absurd. If I had today, I walked into that room, or a young female faculty member walked into that room, we would say, oh my God, this is insane. But that's the way it was. The other day, I introduced one of our cardiothoracic surgeons to the Children's Board of Trustees. She said, I'm one of only 8 female pediatric cardiothoracic surgeons in the United States at the level that she is. So it is still important for us to remember that we continue to address these issues. A lot of research. This is a slide from Dr. Heilman, the work that she has done in making sure that we stay focused on the priorities that we have and the threats that we have. We are continuing to work diligently on removing health disparities. And many of these areas that you see over here, you'll see more and more of these. We now have a national center for sickle cell disease funded by the Georgia Research Alliance. We're working on a world-class center for mental behavioral health, early brain development, and so on and so forth. And it blends very nicely with what the school is trying to do as well. These are many areas of research, the centers that we have, that you'll be learning from many of the speakers in this program. I just put these slides in here to show you that we are the undisputed leader, national leader in clinical care and volumes. We're poised to become a national leader in research, innovation, and education. And I really do believe that no other pediatric enterprise in the country is better positioned to do this than us. And it is because of you. You're the future. Thank you, folks. Thank you. I would love the opportunity to keep talking to you. I enjoy doing a finance talk with the fellows each year. I enjoy coming back to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But please email me, text me if you need my help with anything that you're trying to do, because what you're going to hear today and tomorrow is important. But more importantly, if you feel that we're not supporting you well enough, you let me know. Okay, Stacy?
That was truly inspirational. A great way to kick off the week.
Thank you.